Hi everyone, I'm Z from Susan's family. Today, I'll be showing you the Liyue vest. This tutorial can be viewed on the website by searching for susud.com. This vest comes in two sizes. The method of knitting is identical for different sizes, only the stitch count and row count are different. The vest includes the hem, the body, front and back chest pieces, collar edge and cuffs. First, complete the knitting of each part, then sew together the shoulders and pick up stitches for the collar edge and cuffs. Let's start by learning how to knit the hem and body. As you can see, the vest begins with alternating knit and purl stitches, and is then worked in rounds. The pattern for the hem and body are different. We can take the rightmost column as the first stitch of each round. Circle knitting means every round starts from the first stitch. Read the chart from right to left. Let me demonstrate the exact knitting method. Both the body and hem are worked in rounds. Since there are a large number of stitches, we can use a circular needle for this project. This vest is made by combining two yarns together as one strand for crocheting. For convenient viewing, I will demonstrate below with a single strand of cotton yarn. For specific yarn, color schemes, and needle sizes, please refer to the product details page or paper instructions. Start by casting on. Make a slip knit. Place it on the needle. This stitch will be treated as a purl stitch, in most cases, when working in the round. If the first stitch after casting on is a knit stitch, or a twisted loop, this first stitch counts as a purl stitch. If the first stitch is a purl stitch, or a PTBL, purl one stitch through back loop, then the first cast on stitch should count as a knit stitch. In our chart, the first stitch is a twisted loop, therefore, the first cast on stitch counts as a purl stitch. Then continue with one knit stitch with the yarn below the right needle. Insert it into the loop like this and knit the stitch. Place it back onto the left needle. This is the second stitch. Continue with the third stitch. This one should be a purl stitch. Move the yarn to above the right needle and insert upwards between these two loops. Pay attention, you're not inserting into the loop itself. Purl the stitch. The third stitch is done. Continue with the fourth stitch. Place the yarn below. Insert downwards between these two loops. Knit the stitch. Don't pull too tight here. The fourth stitch is done. This is the method for alternating knit and purl stitches. Continue to alternate with one purl stitch and one knit stitch. Cast on the number of stitches corresponding to the chart. You will notice that after casting on the knit stitch, this yarn is at the front. After casting on the purl stitch, this yarn is at the back. Now, the swatch is done with the cast on. The sample swatch has fewer stitches. The main focus is on the method. Start with the first round. Swap positions like this. The yarn for crocheting is on the right-hand side. Do not twist the starting chain. Knit the first stitch as a K1 TBL, that is, insert the hook into the back loop of a stitch. And knit. This is knitting stitch through back loop on right side. It is commonly abbreviated as K1 TBL. This is the starting position. Pull the yarn slightly tight. For convenience in distinguishing, we can use a stitch marker to separate the first stitch from the last one. If you don't have a stitch marker, you can use a safety pin or paperclip instead. Next, knit 1 purl stitch. In this round, alternate between 1 K1 TBL and 1 purl stitch. That is, every time you see the yarn in front. Knit a K1 TBL. When the yarn is at the back, knit a purl stitch. Finish this round. Don't pull the yarn too tight at the starting position. The first round is complete. Continue with the second round. This round alternates between 1 K1 TBL and 1 purl stitch. In other words, if you see a twisted braid underneath, knit a K1 TBL. If there is a horizontal line below, knit a purl stitch. The knitting method for each round after the hem is identical to the one here. A twisted braid represents one round. Let's continue to finish the remaining rounds. The sample swatch has only 2 rounds. Here are 2 twisted braids. We can call this pattern twisted stockinette stitch. So, the hem section is now complete. After finishing the hem, continue knitting the body. You can notice that the first round with blank squares indicates knit stitches. This is the symbol for a slip stitch with yarn in front, SL1 width. This symbol spans 2 rows. The first row means to simply knit the stitch normally. Therefore, the first round of the body is all knit stitches. Mark the beginning and ending with a stitch marker. If you can't tell the position of the first stitch, you can always keep it marked. Now, the first round of the small sample body is done. Continue to the second round. The first stitch is a purl stitch. The second stitch is a slip stitch with yarn in front, SL1 width. The rest is just these 2 stitch techniques alternating. Start with 1 purl stitch. Then knit the SL1 width. Keep the yarn on the right side, which is the top. Slide the second stitch to the right needle, meaning transfer the loops from left to right. That's the method for knitting the SL1 width. The third stitch is a purl stitch again. Keep the yarn on the top. Knit the purl stitch. Make sure not to pull the yarn too tight. After finishing this stitch, you can see a horizontal bar on the second stitch here, floating on the top. The fourth stitch is a SL1 width. Keep the yarn above. Slide the loops. The SL1 width is done. Continue alternating between purl and SL1 width. And finish this round. Now, the second round of the swatch is complete. Let's continue with the third and fourth rounds. You can notice that the third round is identical to the first round, except the position of the SL1 width, but still knit throughout. Place this yarn underneath the fabric piece first. And knit all stitches. Continue to finish this round. The fourth round is about alternating 1 SL1 width and 1 purl stitch. Before knitting the SL1 width, make sure to place the yarn on the right side of the fabric piece before slipping it. Continue to finish the fourth round. After completing the first 4 rounds, the fifth round alternates between 1 knit stitch and 1 purl stitch. The sixth and seventh rounds use the same stitch patterns, but are perfectly staggered compared to the fifth round. The eighth and ninth rounds are completely identical to the fifth round. From now on, every 4 rounds form a sequence. Keep going until the section of rounds just before the next SL1 width. The 2 sizes have some differences. You can refer to the chart for specifics. Pay attention. The first row of the SL1 width, which is the square with the pointed shape, is actually knit stitch. Please continue to follow the chart and keep knitting until the round before the yarn over. For the larger size, you knit the first 50 rounds. After finishing, I'll demonstrate the method for this round of yarn over, using a small sample. The small sample has fewer rounds. The first stitch is knitting 2 stitches together on right side, K2 tog. Insert the hook into the 2 loops on the left side from left to right, and make 1 knit stitch. Knit 2 stitches together is now complete. It can also be abbreviated as K2 tog. This is equivalent to decreasing 1 stitch. Continue with 1 yarn over. Place the yarn over the right needle, which is equivalent to increasing 1 stitch. The total number of stitches remains unchanged. Continue alternating 1 K2 tog. And 1 yarn over. Work to end of round. Note that after knitting the last yarn over, knit the first stitch of the next round as a knit stitch. The yarn should be on top while crocheting. Otherwise, this yarn over won't form. When you encounter a yarn over, just knit it normally, like this. Next, continue to finish the remaining rounds of the body. Up to this point, the body section is also complete. After finishing the body, you can start knitting the back chest piece next. If you're a beginner, you can first watch my explanation and demonstrations of some techniques, and then start crocheting. After that, the back chest piece is knit flat. Before knitting, count half of the stitches, and separate them with a stitch marker. You need to decrease stitches under the arm. On the right side, always follow the chart from right to left. On the wrong side, always follow the chart from left to right. That is, knit according to the arrow direction. Start with row 1. Start by binding off the corresponding number of stitches. Then knit all stitches until you finish all the loops for the back piece. After finishing row 1, pause knitting on the remaining loops. Leave the loops on the needle. For row 2, knit the wrong side while referring to the pattern. From now on, knit back and forth. The neckline also needs to be bound off. Here, start with the right shoulder. After finishing the right shoulder, end by binding off with a slip stitch. When there is 1 loop left, leave a tail for sewing. About 30 centimeters is enough. Secure the yarn tail. Then join the yarn to cast off the stitches in the middle section. Next, finish knitting the left shoulder, and bind off, then fasten off the yarn. Leave a long yarn tail at the end for sewing together. Now, please watch the detailed demonstration of the method for binding off underarm and neckline stitches. Practice the technique before continuing with your knitting. I'll explain using this small swatch. In row 1, start by binding off several stitches consecutively. Refer to the chart for the exact stitch count. If there are several bind off symbols, it means you need to bind off that many stitches. Here, I need to bind off 4 stitches in a row. If there are a lot of consecutive stitches to bind off, we can separate them first with a stitch marker. Start binding off the stitches. The first stitch can be a slip stitch, or it can be a knit stitch. Here, I'm doing a slip stitch. Then do 1 knit stitch. Then pass the first stitch over the second stitch. That's how you bind off 1 stitch. Unless otherwise specified, on the right side, it's all knit stitches for binding off. Continue with 1 more knit stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Keep knitting and binding off at the same time, until there's only 1 loop left on the right side of the marker. Here, I have 2 loops left. I need to bind off 1 more stitch. Now there is only 1 loop remaining on the right side of the stitch marker. This is the 4th stitch loop. We need to bind off this stitch as well. Therefore, you need to knit 1 more stitch and bind it off. The next stitch will be the final bind off symbol, the adjacent stitch. Here we simply knit it. Pay attention. Because the stitch techniques may vary depending on different patterns, you need to refer to the chart for this stitch. After finishing, bind off the 4th stitch as well. This way, all 4 stitches in the chart will be bound off. Continue following the chart for knitting. Note: next you should start knitting from the 2nd stitch, next to the bind off symbol. Before knitting, slightly tighten this loop to prevent any noticeable holes. There's no special pattern here, so we'll knit throughout. Finish knitting this row. That concludes the first row. Continue with the second row. We will work this row on the wrong side. Bind off the first 4 stitches in sequence at the beginning. Separate first with a stitch marker. Then begin binding off. Similarly, you can start with 1 slip stitch for the first stitch, or you can do a purl stitch. Here, I'll do a slip stitch. Then do 1 purl stitch. Next, pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This way you've bound off 1 stitch. Continue with 1 more purl stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. When there's no special instruction on the wrong side, you simply purl and bind off at the same time. Keep purling and binding off simultaneously until there's only 1 stitch left to the right of the marker. Here, we'll bind off 1 more stitch. Now there's only 1 stitch remaining to the right of the marker. That means there's just the 4th stitch loop left. Bind this stitch off as well. So you need to purl 1 more stitch, and then bind it off. The next stitch, which is also the one adjacent to the last bind off symbol. On the wrong side, we will purl this stitch. Bind off the 4th stitch. In actual knitting, the specific stitch technique for this stitch should refer to the pattern. So the 4 stitches on the chart are bound off. Continue following the chart for knitting. Pay attention, the next step should start knitting from the 2nd stitch, next to the bind off symbol. Before knitting, slightly tighten this loop. To prevent obvious holes. There's no special pattern here, so we will knit all stitches as purl stitches. Now, the 2nd row is explained. Next, bind off on the right side. Using the same method as in the 1st row, bind off on the wrong side. In the same way as row 2. I'll demonstrate 2 more rows. Continue with the 3rd row. At the beginning of this row, bind off 2 stitches. First, bind off 1 stitch. On the right side, knit and bind off. Then knit 1 stitch and bind it off. Pay attention. When binding off the last stitch, the stitch you need to work should be done according to the chart. Sometimes the pattern is special, so this may not necessarily be a knit stitch. Please don't make a mistake. It's the same for the wrong side. Now I've bound off 2 stitches. Continue to finish this row. After it's done, continue with the 4th row. At the beginning of this row, bind off 2 stitches as well. Start by binding off 1 stitch. On the wrong side, use purl stitches to bind off. Then work 1 more purl stitch and bind it off. This way, you've bound off 2 stitches. Continue to finish the rest of the row. Now I've completed the 4th row. If you only need to bind off 1 stitch on each side, the method will be identical to how you bound off the first stitch earlier. This is the method for binding off underarm stitches. Let's learn a commonly used neckline decrease, which is to decreasing stitches by binding off and form the desired curve. Suppose this is the front neckline. Therefore, this side is the left shoulder. And this side is the right shoulder. Sometimes, you need to work short rows on the shoulders. There are no short rows here. We are only focusing on decreasing stitches for the neckline. Let's start with the left shoulder. This chart has fewer stitches, and mainly explains the method. First, knit the first row of the neckline. Here, you'll start by knitting 13 knit stitches. If there are more stitches, you can use a stitch marker to separate them before continuing. I've already finished the first row. The remaining loops are on hold for now. Next, we'll work on the second row. The second row is worked on the wrong side. You'll notice that this row starts with binding off 3 stitches together. If there are more consecutive stitches to bind off, we can separate them using a stitch marker first. Then start binding off the stitches. Begin with 1 slip stitch. Then work 1 purl stitch. Next, pass the first stitch over the second stitch. That's how you bind off 1 stitch. Continue with another purl stitch. And bind off 1 more stitch. When there are no special instructions on the wrong side, you simply purl and bind off at the same time. There is 1 stitch remaining to the right of the marker, which is the 3rd stitch loop. We need to bind off this stitch. Therefore, you need to work 1 more stitch and bind it off. The next stitch is the one adjacent to the last bind off symbol. Here, we just work a purl stitch. Note that, since different motifs may have different stitch techniques, please refer to the pattern for this stitch. After finishing, bind off the 3rd stitch. This way, the 3 stitches on the chart are bound off. Continue following the diagram for crocheting. Pay attention, the next step should start from the 2nd stitch beside the bind off symbol. Begin crocheting from there. Before starting, slightly tighten the loop too. Avoid any noticeable holes. There's no special motif here. We will knit all stitches as purl. Now, the 2nd row is explained. Next, work on the 3rd row. Refer to the chart. Knit throughout. I've already finished it. Continue with the fourth row. Here, just bind off 2 stitches at the beginning. The method is identical to the first row. Start with 1 slip stitch. Then knit 1 purl stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Continue with 1 purl stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Slightly tighten the loop. Then knit all remaining stitches as purl, and finish the 5th row as well. Now, I've already completed the 5th row. Continue with the 6th row. At the beginning of this row, just bind off 1 stitch. The method is identical to binding off the first stitch in the first row. After completing that, purl throughout. For the remaining 7th and 9th rows, knit all stitches as knit. The 8th row is the same as the 6th row. Starting with binding off 1 stitch, the 10th row does not require binding off any stitches. Just knit the purl stitches normally. Now, I've finished these 10 rows. In the end, there should be 6 stitches remaining. Next, start knitting the right shoulder. Before continuing, we need to bind off 9 stitches in the middle first. You can use a stitch marker to separate them. Pick up the new yarn. Make a slip knot with the yarn. Slightly tighten the loop. First, knit 2 stitches. Then bind off 1 stitch. Knit 1 more stitch. Bind off 1 stitch again. If there's no special instruction, on the right side, you'll be binding off while knitting the stitches. Continue binding off the remaining stitches. Similarly, pay attention that, when binding off the last loop, the stitch you knit is the first stitch to the left of the bind off symbol. Refer to the pattern and knit the corresponding stitch. Here, we'll continue with the knit stitch, and bind off at the same time. Once completed, Start from the second stitch and finish the row. Then, on the wrong side, purl all stitches in the second row. I've now finished the second row. Continue with the third row. At the beginning, bind off 3 stitches in a row. You can start with 1 slip stitch and 1 knit stitch. Then bind off 1 stitch. Continue knitting and binding off the stitches. Now, the 3 stitches have been bound off. Continue to finish the third row, and complete the fourth row as well. I've now finished the fourth row. At the beginning of the fifth row, bind off 2 stitches. The bind off method is identical to the first 2 stitches of row 3. For the 7th and 9th rows later on, you will bind off 1 stitch at the beginning of each row. The bind off method is identical to the way you bind off the first stitch in row 3. I will continue to finish the remaining part of the right shoulder. Now I have finished knitting the right shoulder. There should be 6 stitches remaining here. This way, the technique for decreasing stitches at the neckline has been explained completely. After completing the back chest piece, continue by joining the yarn to knit the front chest piece. The first row is knitted on the right side. The first 2 rows are identical to the first 2 rows of the back chest piece. Everyone should finish these first 2 rows first. Starting from the third row, you will need to divide and knit the 2 sides separately. For the third row, we will start with the left shoulder. Note that, here it refers to the actual left and right when wearing, which is the side where the yarn is located. Before starting the third row, place a stitch marker on the middle stitch. Then start knitting until there are 4 loops left before the stitch marker. Start by continuing with the bind off. Refer to the pattern for the exact number of bind off stitches. After leaving 4 loops, knit 2 stitches together on right side, K2 tog. Then knit the remaining 2 stitches. The third row is complete. Pause the remaining loops. Turn your work. Continue with the fourth row, purl throughout. The fourth row is complete. For any decreases at the end from now on, knit as demonstrated in row 3. While for the ending without decreasing, just knit throughout. After finishing this side, bind off. Similarly, bind off while knitting the right side. At the end, leave a 5-10 cm tail and cut the yarn. After completing the left shoulder, continue with the right shoulder. First, drop the stitch in the middle. Be mindful to prevent it from slipping off. Then, join the yarn and knit 2 stitches starting from this stitch. Next, knit 1 spo. That is, first pick up 1 stitch in the knit stitch way. Then knit 1 stitch. After that, pass the previous stitch over the next one. This completes the spo. From now on, we'll call it spo. Then knit throughout. Finish this row completely. For every row that starts with a decrease from now on, knit 2 stitches first. Then knit 1 spo. For the spo, refer to the demonstration in the first row here. It will be the same as the ending of the left shoulder. You can finish off and break the yarn normally. Up to this point, the front chest piece has also been explained. Finally, you need to sew the shoulders together. Use the whip stitch for the shoulders. You can also choose your preferred sewing method. I'll use this sample swatch to demonstrate the shoulder whip stitch sewing technique simply. The sewing is done on the right side. Place the front and back pieces with their wrong sides facing each other. Thread the reserved long tail onto a darning needle. Sew from front to back like this, every time. Insert through a few stitches at the edge. Don't pull too tight when sewing. After finishing, tie a knot on the wrong side, and weave in the ends. You can weave in a few more stitches if you'd like. Make sure to hide all other yarn tails as well. This is the method for shoulder sewing. After finishing the shoulder seams, start picking up stitches around the neckline to knit the collar edge. Both the collar and cuff edges can be worked in the round using straight needles. You can begin picking up stitches from the position on the back piece. That is, start below the right shoulder seam. Pick up a few strands along the edge and work knit stitches. Pick up a few strands along the edge and knit. You can insert your needle into the space between the first and second stitches along the edge. That is, after picking up the stitches. The braid-like texture of the second stitch from the edge is not destroyed. Specifically, you can also pick up stitches according to your preference. Additionally, in the middle of the front piece, there is one stitch held by a stitch marker. When you reach this point, knit one stitch with this loop, and continue to mark this stitch. Note that, for this vest, picking up stitches is not counted as the first round. Please refer to the demonstration of the method for picking up stitches around the neckline, and combine with the situation I just explained. Complete the picking up of stitches for the neckline. For the stitch pickup around the neckline, please refer to the annotations on the structure diagram for the stitch distribution. Start by picking up and knitting the first round. I'll demonstrate using this small sample. We begin picking up stitches from the back piece. You can see that the back piece is usually divided into 3 sections, the 2 sides and the middle part. Before picking up and knitting, you can first allocate the total number of stitches to be picked up on the back piece, according to the requirements on the chart, dividing them into these 3 sections. Usually, in the middle, stitches are picked up correspondingly one by one. The remaining stitches can be evenly distributed to the 2 sides. For example, if I need to pick up a total of 21 stitches on this back piece, I'll pick up 11 stitches one by one in the middle. These 11 stitches are usually the number of stitches for binding off in the middle. Then, simply pick up 5 stitches evenly on each of the 2 sides. For this round of picking up stitches, knit them all in this round. For edges like these, you just need to pick up a few strands along the edge. Be mindful to keep them roughly even. Here, I'll demonstrate using different colored yarns, so it's more convenient for watching. After finishing picking up the side stitches, in the middle, pick up 11 stitches corresponding one by one. After completing, for this side edge, continue to pick up 5 stitches evenly. Once done, you'll reach the position of the front piece. Distribute the total number of picked up stitches on the front piece equally among these 3 sections. For example, if I need to pick up a total of 39 stitches on this front piece, 7 stitches were bound off in the middle here, so I need to pick up 16 stitches on each side. Just roughly distribute them evenly. After picking up all the stitches, check the stitch count, then divide them evenly onto 3 needles. That concludes the first round of picking up stitches. After picking up stitches for the neckline, I'll continue using this swatch to demonstrate the method for the first round in the chart. For the first round, work all stitches as purl stitches. Pay attention to the junction between the two needles. Make sure to knit the first stitch tighter. After completing the first round, continue with the second round. This round involves alternating K1 TBL and purl stitches, since the number of stitches for the first needle of the two sizes are different in terms of distance from the middle stitch. Meaning the number of stitches before the middle stitch, if it's an even number. The first stitch of the second round will start with a K1 TBL, if it's an odd number here. The first stitch will start with a purl stitch. For example, for the large size, the back piece is picked up with 59 stitches. And the front piece side is picked up with 52 stitches, which adds up to an odd number. Therefore, for the larger size, the first stitch of the second round starts with a purl stitch. Keep knitting until there is one stitch away from the middle stitch. In the sample, the number of stitches to the stitch marker is even. Therefore, the first stitch is a K1 TBL. After there is one stitch left, work 1 S2 KPO. First, move from left to right and slip 2 loops from the left side at the same time. Then knit 1 stitch. Next, place these 2 loops over the following stitch. The S2 KPO is now completed. Then continue alternating 1 K1 TBL and 1 purl stitch. Finish this round. Now, I have completed the second round. For the following 4th, 6th, and 8th rounds, every time there is one loop left from the middle, work 1 S2 KPO. The method is identical to the second round. For the other rounds, follow the chart for the stitches in the middle. Both sides are alternating K1 TBL and purl stitches. After everything is finished, perform a single rib bind off. That means, when you see a twisted knit stitch, work it as a purl. When you see a purl stitch, work it as a knit to bind off. In the middle, you also need to switch the position of the yarn. For more details, please refer to the video demonstration for the single rib bind off. After everything is finished, perform a single rib bind off. First, knit 2 stitches in the opposite stitch pattern to the texture below. Here, the first stitch has a braid below it. The second stitch has a horizontal bar below it. So, start by working 1 purl stitch. Then work 1 knit stitch. Next, pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This way, you've bound off 1 stitch. Continue with 1 stitch in the opposite texture from what's below. Here it's a braid, so you should work 1 purl stitch. Before you do that, use your left hand to pinch the bottom of the loop on the right needle. Then take out the needle. Place it below the yarn and then pass it back through the loop. Then work a purl stitch. Again, pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This way, you've bound off another stitch. Continue with 1 stitch in the opposite texture from what's below. Here it's a horizontal line, so you should work 1 knit stitch. Before you do that, take out the needle, place it above the yarn, and then pass it back through the loop. Work 1 knit stitch. Then pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This way, you've bound off 1 more stitch. Every time, you need to work a stitch in the opposite texture from what's below. And before you do that, you must change the position of the yarn by moving the right needle. When working a purl stitch, the yarn is above. When working a knit stitch, the yarn is below. Let's continue binding them off. When there is 1 loop left, leave the yarn tail a little longer. Secure the loop in place. Finally, you can use this yarn tail to sew the beginning and ending together. Make sure there are no noticeable notches. This completes the single rib bind off. After finishing the collar edge, follow the same method. Pick up stitches separately on both cuffs to knit the sleeve edges. On the left, you can start picking up stitches from the back piece. On the right, you can start picking up stitches from the front piece. After picking up the corresponding number of stitches, pick up 1 stitch roughly in the middle under the arm. And mark this stitch. Then continue picking up the remaining stitches. After picking up all the stitches, the knitting method for the remaining rounds is the same as for the collar edge. For the first stitch of round 2, determine whether to knit K1 TBL or purl by referring to the previous method. After you finish knitting, the ending bind off method is also the same as for the collar edge. Up to this point, the explanation of this vest is complete. If you have any questions during the process, don't hesitate to reach us via our website, Susan's Family, supporting your handwork experience. sharing the joy of life. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next episode.